I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over current news. This past week or two has been a little insane, and the media and social media has done a pretty good job of covering everything. We found out that Trump is indebted to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, that he may owe the IRS $100 million, and that he has taken at least 80 plus million from foreigners since he became president. We also learned that the First Lady doesn't care much for caged children or Christmas. Don Jr.'s girlfriend settled a lawsuit after an assistant sued her for sexual harassment, and our president has no issue with nationalist militia or white supremacists. Trump also became unhinged at a debate, which spawned Proud Boy merchandise, leading to a revision of debate rules before getting and spreading COVID-19 throughout DC. The nomination of Barrett may or may not be held up because of 3 senators having COVID, probably from an event honoring her. And the president left Walter Reed after getting experimental drugs and needing oxygen, which may or may not be why he said California was going to need more water if they didn't stop sending it to little fishes. Oh yes, an article came out showing Barrett had signed onto an ad calling for the end of Roe v. Wade. But none of that is what this video is about. I'll put links in the read more section below about all this stuff. This video is about what stacking the court actually means and how it would work. First things first, there are currently 9 seats on the Supreme Court and 8 are filled, and Barrett is the nomination for the 9th, despite only having won the popular vote only once in the past 30 plus years. And that time as incumbent, Republican presidents will have appointed 6 of the 9 justices because of what is called a judicial review, where the judges look at laws and decide whether they're constitutional. That means the ultimate decision on the constitutionality of our laws will be decided, if nothing changes, by 6 people appointed by presidents without the mandate of the people. Now, you could argue Bush had the mandate of the people in his 2nd term, but he very likely would not have been the nominee or won if he hadn't been an incumbent president. And Trump will have appointed 3 of judges, despite losing the popular vote, and 2 of those justices considered stolen by a part of the country. If you are an American and aren't aware of how big of a deal this is, I'll give you 2 examples. One that's easy is Citizens United, a conservative organization, made a negative film about Hillary Clinton in order to try to influence the Democratic primary in 2008. Doing so violated a law called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, and the group behind the film challenged that act. The conservative justices had the majority, and they not only ruled that it was fine for the organization to make the film in order to influence the election, but effectively said that money was equivalent to speech, and spending by company, nonprofits, etc. should have First Amendment protections. Since then, the wealthy has spent billions, probably tens of billions, influencing our elections in ways that would have been illegal if the court had a different makeup. The justices appointed by Democrats and 1 conservative justice voted against Citizens United and argued in their dissents that overturning the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act would allow our elections to be bought and sold, which they now have been. Burwell versus Hobby Lobby is another easy one to understand. In the same split, conservatives gave closely held companies the right to not provide contraception to their employees, including IUDs and Plan B, if they had a religious reason for doing so. In this case, Hobby Lobby argued they believed that life begins at fertilization. If you aren't American, this may not seem like such a big deal, but essentially workplace insurance is how most American women afford birth control. Hobby Lobby employs over 40,000 people. Imagine being told your employer did not believe in birth control, so you can no longer receive it as a part of your healthcare plan. I hope that helps you understand the importance of the Supreme Court and who is on it. Also, as a general rule, Democratic appointed judges will be more likely to support LGBT rights, reproductive rights, union rights, and the rights to health care. Republican appointed judges would be more likely to support corporate rights, religious freedom, right to life, things like that. Democrats have a few options to stack the court if they win the Senate, House, and presidency. They can accept the court as it is, and maybe the next 10 or 30 years of ruling will go against their interest, or they can alter the makeup of the court. Stacking the court is literally just passing a law through Congress that says there are X numbers of Supreme Court judges, and they can literally pick a number. 13, 15, 50, whatever. And if they have the majority of the Senate, they can hold hearings and put those people on the bench. That 6 to 9 conservative supermajority could become a 13 to 6 progressive majority with the sign of a law. And if you're thinking that sounds crazy, well, kind of, but so does the court representing the views and will of the minority of Americans. However, there is nothing, to my knowledge, unconstitutional about the above. The Constitution basically says justices are appointed for life, well, as long as they behave well, and there has to be a Chief Justice. The court actually started with 6 justices and has had as few as 5 and as many as 10. FDR almost added 6 more justices, but he just didn't have the votes to get it done. But with anger over Trump and the view of multiple justices' seats being stolen, Democrats might be able to pull it off, and they could do so in a way that probably seals the court as progressive for years to come. They could appoint 10 people in their 30s to lifetime appointments, assuming they hold the Senate and the executive branches of the government. That is the most basic idea. The second idea, the one Bernie Sanders mentioned during his campaign, is rotating judges. This argument, from what I understand, basically says just because a federal judge receives a lifetime appointment doesn't mean that a Supreme Court judge gets to stay on the Supreme Court for life. They could be moved to a lower court, and then that lower court judge can be moved up to the Supreme Court. One of the only law-based objections I've seen for this argument is that you can't lower their salary, and the salary of SCOTUS is much higher. Basically, you can't punish them without cause. But that could easily be fixed in the law, where a judge was able to maintain his or her salary despite any change of position. This rotation into the Supreme Court would likely require additional confirmation hearings. Another option mentioned was term limits on the highest court. This may or may not be as a part of a rotation process, but some legal scholars believe there is no barrier to making service on the Supreme Court itself term limited. The numbers of years I saw was 18. That would age out 3 of the conservative judges during Biden's first term and 1 liberal judge. Those term limits alone would single-handedly flip the court, and 4 more members of the court would become senior justices who could fill in on lower courts or fill in during vacancies like one we have now. Sort of like active retirement, where they can sit on some lower court cases and fill in when needed on SCOTUS. But there is another theory about rotation as well. Unlike simply rotating in some judges, you simply make all judges of a certain tier Supreme Court Associate Justices. This would let the current court keep their titles and nobody would technically be demoted. However, court cases would go to random panel of judges as proposed to 9 members. Think of it as a lottery or jury duty. You could appoint 100 judges or elevate 100 judges, and then randomly 9 or 15 or whatever the draw would be to hear each case. That might be the most constitutional, if awkward, approach Now to the reasoning or justification that Democrats would use for any of the above. And to be clear, I'm primarily talking about the Supreme Court, but Democrats could expand the lower courts as well. I already gave you one major reason. We have a court right now where the majority of judges were nominated by a president who lost the popular vote, and many were confirmed by senators who represent the minority of the population. This breaks down to a tyranny of the minority argument. This can be further expanded when you consider how out of sync the conservative judges are compared to the majority of Americans. They tend to oppose reproductive rights, while 3/4 of Americans support Roe v. Wade. They have ruled against things like unions and Bostack and Clayton County, and the majority of conservative judges ruled against LGBT people having civil rights. To be clear, 2 of the conservative justices agreed that LGBT persons should have those rights, but we know for a fact that the conservative judge nominations to replace Ginsburg said the idea that the Civil Rights Act could apply to LGBT persons is a stretch. The argument that will likely be made by Democrats was previewed by Kamala Harris in the VP debate. She pointed out that not a single major judge nominated by Trump to the court out of 50 nominations was black. If Barrett is confirmed, the Supreme Court will have 6 Catholics, 1 former Catholic who is now Episcopalian, and 2 Jewish members. 2 members of the court are people of color, and 3 will be women. All but Barrett attended Harvard or Yale, and diversity matters. The diversity argument is likely to be how the Democrats sell any changes to the court. If you look at the court based on statistics, the court being primarily male is out of line with the general population in the US, which is around 51% female. Racially, it isn't too far out of line, except that it is missing Asian American representation, but education-wise, it's completely out of line. Harvard and Yale law is undoubtedly good law schools, maybe even the best, but every school has different perspective in how they see the world. I've already seen arguments on CBC about the Supreme Court justices need to be from less elite backgrounds, that their arguments need to be grounded in a reality very different from the one that the individuals who started out making 6 figures as recent graduates have. But maybe they also need to not have taken constitutional law from the same professor as the other judges, or have an education that didn't emphasize textualism or another approach to the Constitution. Different academic backgrounds might give them that. And then there is the argument that Democrats won't make, but I find incredibly relevant. About 25% of Americans aren't Catholic, Jewish, or Muslim, but have no religious affiliation at all. Some are agnostic, some are atheists, some consider themselves spiritual. In any case, a predominantly Abrahamic court with no variation makes no sense with that large of a population with no religion. And then there are what I alluded to earlier, stolen seats. The Republican Senate in Obama's last term refused too much of that time to hold hearings or seat judges for Obama. That means Trump has appointed more judges than any president in recent history in his first term. And his judges have been 85% white, and 75% of his judges' appointments are male. Supreme Court seat Trump first filled had been held for nearly a year by Republican Senate before Trump won. The argument made by Republicans then was Obama should not be able to appoint someone to a lifetime position during an election year, and that whoever won the election should fill it. The seat Trump nominated Barrett to came open after the first votes of 2020 election had been cast, and Republicans are trying to fill it before the new president and Senate takes office, presumably because they believe that they will lose. Let me know in the comments below or on Twitter what you think the Democrats will do, and what action do you support when it comes to the Supreme Court. Also, please like this video and don't forget to subscribe.